Okay.
indication.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and I apologize to the audience for our brief delay. I'd like to call this special meeting to order, and I guess the first thing I'd like to do is make a motion that we table the MOU discussion and vote today. And do I have a motion to do that?
So moved.
All right, so let me clarify, because I think I stated it improperly. We're going to, what we're going to do is vote to modify the agenda to remove the MOU item from the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion, second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So with that, I am going to, actually, we're going to go into executive session at this point. I'm sorry, we're moving things around here. Let me ask Babs. Well, I apologize. I went a little quickly through this. Do we have a quorum on the phone?
May I take roll?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you. Director Clark?
Present.
Director Finn?
Here.
Director Floyd?
Here.
Director Land?
Present.
Director Laird? Director Mudge?
Present.
Director Nell? Director Singleton?
Here.
Director Wynn?
Here.
Chairman Brady, got one.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. So we have modified the agenda. We've now taken a roll call. We have everybody present. And at this point, we're going to ask for a motion to enter into executive session to receive legal advice and discuss negotiations incident to proposed contractual negotiations relating to H4287, to receive legal advice relating to new nuclear construction project litigation, and to discuss employment and compensation matters. And before I ask for the vote on this, we are going to actually discuss the H4287 issues in executive session first, then we'll come out of executive session, and then we'll go back into executive session to deal with the other matters later in the agenda. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Motion, second? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are in executive session. Molly, are we good? Okay, welcome back, everybody. Just so everyone understands, the executive session is in recess, and we are now back in the public session. No action was taken during the executive session. Wanted to make a couple of comments. As most of you noticed, at the beginning of this meeting, we voted to remove the memorandum of understanding ratification from the agenda, and really just want to give you a little explanation of that. There's some concern that that memorandum of understanding could potentially create problems for the reform plan submission, which will go in later in November, and out of the abundance of caution, the board decided to remove it from the agenda, not only for this meeting, but there's no intention on the board's part to vote on ratification of a memorandum of understanding at any time prior to the reform proposal submission in November. So just wanted to make that clear. And the other comment would be that the documents that Santee Cooper agreed to provide to the governor's office will be forthcoming within the next 24 hours, and the delay is simply due to the Hurricane Dorian emergency response plan of Santee Cooper, but I'm told that those documents should be at the governor's office within the next 24 hours. One more comment before I turn it over to Mr. Bonzel. By the way, are we going to discuss Dorian before the business plan? Yes. Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and do that, and then I'll comment before we get started on the business plan.
I'm actually not going to discuss the Hurricane Dorian update. I'm going to ask Marty Watson to discuss that with you. It should be a relatively brief report, but what I wanted to say by way of introduction is having spent a lot of time with the incident management team, myself, and watching them in action, and the folks that you've got in the operations center, et cetera. It was an awesome display of great teamwork, not only inside Santee Cooper, but as well with our other customers and co-ops. And it was a learning experience for me, and it was a great display, I think, of terrific coordination with one single purpose, and that's to get people back in power safely and as reliably as possible. And it was just a terrific exercise. You've got a great team. They know what to do. They've got their assignments. This, by the way, is their coach. So, Marty, you want to come up and give us your report?
Thank you, Mr. Bonzel. I think you may be giving me a bit too much credit for the events of last week, but we do have a fantastic team at Santee Cooper. Anybody that's ever been a part of storm preparation, storm restorations, you understand that it's a team sport. And our team at Santee Cooper involves a lot of different operational areas. But as Mr. Bonzel mentioned, that also involves central and the local distribution co-ops. It's an interesting time to watch each other work together for the good of all electric customers. So I'm thankful to be standing before you. I happen to be the incident commander for Santee Cooper. That means I play a small part in our restoration efforts. Our job is really to facilitate needs, direct any efforts as far as where resources should go. So with that, I'll try to give you a brief rundown of what happened before the storm, what happened during, and what happened after. So prior to the Labor Day weekend, heading into the holiday, Santee Cooper entered our emergency operating conditions. And essentially what that means is we were starting internal and external calls. If you notice the forecast in the right-hand corner, top right-hand corner, at that point in time, we were projecting to see secondary impacts, a storm that would make landfall in Florida, wreak havoc on Florida, and then by the time it got to us, it would be a somewhat minimal storm, but we were already beginning to make preparations for that. By Labor Day, the forecast in the bottom right corner is actually what we were faced with. So at that point in time, it looked like the storm was going to make landfall somewhere between the tip of Florida and somewhere in North Carolina. So all hands on deck, we began CIMT phone calls, which is really just all the operational areas across Santee Cooper coordinating needs. At that point in time, we start reaching out to contract crews and to our APPA mutual aid, to where we secure, by Tuesday, we had 60 contract crews on standby, ready to assist with restoration. All told, with our internal employees and with contractors, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 800 people on the transmission and distribution side. If you add in all the generation folks, all the water plant folks that are on standby, as well as corporate support, well over 1,200 people getting ready for the storm. In addition, we also had secured 3 helicopters, 2 of which I believe had solve capability to where they could fly the system and clean up after the fact. All pre-storm checklists were completed. That means all operational areas know what they need to do ahead of the storm. They're battening down hatches, securing equipment that may move, and making last-minute preparations. The last bullet point here, anyone who was around Santee Cooper about a year ago understands that with any storm of any magnitude, the Waccamaw River forecast means a lot to us. So at that point in time, we had also begun monitoring the Waccamaw River. All right, so the storm actually hit us we started feeling impact somewhere around midnight, Wednesday night, early morning, Thursday. And at that point in time, our first transmission delivery point went out somewhere, I believe, around 1 o'clock in the morning, down in the Johns Island area. The good news about this storm is that it actually stayed off of our coast for the most part. So as long as wind speeds were below 35 miles an hour, our crews were able to get out and work through the storm, which they did. You can see the top right picture there is while the storm's going on, we're out addressing needs, getting people back online. There were a few tornadoes during the hurricane, as you can see the bottom picture there. We actually had, if you watched any of the videos, there was a video of a tornado in the North Myrtle Beach area. And if you look real close, I believe you can see our North Myrtle Beach Service Center. So right in our service territory, several tornadoes. All right, so outages, there'll be two different charts here. One will be, this is the retail customer outages. You can see somewhere around 50,000 total unique outages. The peak on the system at any one time was right around 21,000 at 9 p.m. You can see that peak happens quickly and it's addressed quickly. It was actually a transmission issue that took out 2 substations. We're able to get out, respond during the storm, and get them back in very quickly. All told, we start feeling impacts early morning Thursday. We are completely restored by 8:20 p.m. Saturday. But in reality, somewhere around 7 o'clock p.m. on Friday, a day later, we were down to 100 or 200 customers. So the vast majority were done quickly. If you've ever been involved in this, the last few outages take a whole lot longer to get to because they're onesies, twosies, and they're in some pretty tough terrain. As far as our transmission system, same look here. You can look at the transmission system in all kinds of ways. This is on a delivery point basis, just to show essentially what substations were out where we serve customers. You can see our peak was at 1 p.m. The story here is by that night, by 11 p.m. Thursday, we had all wholesale delivery points back online. The one lingering delivery point out there was the spillway line, and it serves, I believe, 8 customers. It includes small boat landings, Dennis Wildlife Center, so no real customer service. So, success story, that's the benefit of having a storm that sits off of your coast rather than slams you head on. You're able to get out and work during the storm. Talk a little bit about teamwork. I think this was a good example of how Santee Cooper and the co-ops work together. So at 7 a.m. on Friday, our CorpCom group puts out a post that we have about 6,800 customers out, mainly in Georgetown and Horry County, and you can see Horry Electric Cooperative's response there. I think that's a signal of the teamwork that was happening in the field, both during and after the storm. So thank you, Horry Electric. Final, once again, if you were around during Hurricane Florence, you spent an awful lot of time and energy focused on what was happening at the former Grainger ash ponds. So just to set the scene of work that's been done since last October till now. In Ash Pond 1, which is the top ash pond, all soil and contact soil have been removed ahead of the storm. We've completed all testing. All the testing shows that we meet the criteria for closure. We're waiting on final DHEC certification, and that we need to supply them with a final survey so that they can certify that pond clean. And we actually have a permit from the Corps, I believe, that we can actually breach that dike down to the high water level once we're ready to establish our wetlands in that pond. So for all intents and purposes, Pond 1 is clean ahead of the storm. Pond 2, which was the focus of our response last year, since that time we've removed, I believe, 200,000 tons of ash and about 75% of the contact soil. That would be 1 foot of soil below the ash soil interface. So the bulk of that work had been done, and it's in a similar condition ahead of Dorian that Pond 1 was ahead of Hurricane Florence. So all bulk ash has been removed, some minimal amount. I think it's about 1,000 tons remaining in that pond. This next slide is a busy slide. I'll try to walk you through the point of it. So the red line is the river forecast that comes out, and it comes out multiple times a day. And all that's showing is at that point in time what the projected peak was. So that's not necessarily the timing of the peak. Actually, the peak was projected to occur on Friday in all instances. But you can see how the forecast jumps from a gauge elevation of 10 to 12.5 to 15.5, and you can see what that means to our approximate top of dike being 15. So as soon as we get the first forecast, it projects somewhere around 12.5. This green line here is the pond 2 water elevation. So just like we did last year, once we saw that river forecast jump up, we actually began pumping water into pond 2 to stabilize the dikes. You can see that continues on through till we get right close to the max of the river, and the success story of pond 2. No damage sustained on pond 2. Pond 1, just ahead of the hurricane, we actually went in and installed a controlled spillway down to river gauge elevation 13, and that was meant to allow water to come in a controlled manner into pond 1. Once again, that pond was clean. We inspected dikes throughout the storm, and as of 5:30 p.m. Saturday, there were no issues found during the inspection. The following morning, yesterday morning, when the crew showed up to the site to do their inspection, they found a breach of the dike in pond 1. Within, I'm going to say within 100 foot of where the spillway was installed. There's no anticipated environmental impact to this breach. Once again, that pond was clean. We've removed all the ash and contact soil. In response, we had some lessons learned last year when we responded out there. We now know where to get turbidity curtain from, how to install it rapidly, so we have multiple layers of turbidity curtains and floating boom out. We've initiated water testing, which we performed last year in conjunction with DHEC. We've been in communication with all stakeholders as well. And we've instituted 24/7 monitoring from now until the river recedes back to its normal level. Another point is that the breach of the pond 1 dike does not in any way affect the integrity of pond 2. So pond 2 is still in good shape. We're actually working with DHEC now to establish a plan to remove the water back out of pond 2. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
The team did a great job.
Thank you.
I think Marty's style, as you can tell, is a little bit more of a velvet hammer, but he keeps people moving all in the right direction and did a fabulous job. And I want to credit my friend Mark Ty with giving me one piece of the best advice that I've received thus far at Santee Cooper. I asked what is expected of me during one of these events. His response was, stay out of the way. Excellent advice. So with that, Chairman Ray, I think you wanted to make some introductory comments.
Sure. So what we're about to listen to over the course of the next 30 or so minutes is the updated business plan for Santee Cooper. That business plan, or this business plan, is a result of several things. First of all, I think this board, it's fair to say that this board has been looking forward to this updated business plan for quite some time, and that in our search for a new CEO and a new deputy CEO, we talked about the need to update the company's business plan and the load and resource plan for the company. And so the first charge that the board gave to Mark and Charlie was to completely look at the company, look at the load and resources plan of the company, and advise the board on a way forward to where we could immediately institute changes and business approaches that would be more, as Mark said, lighter, greener, and sort of newer in approach and strategy. And this business plan that we're about to see is a result of those discussions and the work product of those. I had the benefit of attending updated meetings weekly with Mark and the leadership team to talk about board input in terms of what was important to us. And so I appreciate having the opportunity to give some input into this board plan. I'd also point out, and I'm sure Mark will as well, is that the Department of Administration and their advisors, specifically E3, who is the utility advisor on the team, has been advised and consulted and a part of the input related to this approach. And then lastly, I'd point out that Mark and Charlie have consulted with Central and and received an updated load forecast from Central that was part of this as well. So we heard the legislature back during the Senate Select Committee process that was encouraging Santee Cooper to move forward with an updated business plan and not wait for reform plan submission, and we're trying to do just that. So this plan is not only a result of that, but an attempt to move the company forward and try to provide benefit to our customers and our constituents. We will look forward to submitting our reform plan in November. I think around November 15th is the submission date, and that reform plan, we'll challenge Mark and team to improve upon this plan with that submission in November. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark to provide and present the plan.
And I think Mr. Baxter wanted to make a couple introductory comments. Mike.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Just a comment from the legal department, if I may, before we begin. Since their arrival here, our CEO, Mark Bonsall, and Deputy CEO, Charlie Duckworth, have been leading an effort to establish a new going forward business forecast for Santee Cooper, and that's being unveiled today. The Department of Administration has asked us to use this forecast, or has asked to use the forecast as the base plan by which to compare other bids that are received in the H4287 process. We are aware that Section 8 of H4287 requires confidentiality that prevents work product and submitted bids from being disclosed, and Santee Cooper will participate in and fully abide by that process in submitting its own reform bid in November. This document today is not Santee Cooper's reform plan bid. Additionally, because Santee Cooper is a public agency, FOIA requires that this board approve the new business forecast in public session, which is the purpose of this session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We will be expeditious about presenting this. There are a number of presenters and a number of topics, but we will try to move through them apace as you have a number of the items in this business plan are already in the public domain. And I don't want to waste your time covering ground that's been covered already, but one very, very, very important comment is to provide great kudos to all of the employees within Santee Cooper that worked on developing this material. Let me tell you, it's been a tremendous amount of work and focus and a tight schedule to comply with the needs of the DOA to open the data room, et cetera, et cetera. It's just been a tremendous effort. I want to thank all of the employees that worked on this. I know it was there were a lot of weekends and a lot of late nights. This is the agenda. Again, we'll kind of speed through this relatively quickly. Again, I have said I found Santee Cooper to be in better financial shape than I had anticipated prior to getting here on July 9th. This is an example thereof. This is the debt service coverage statement. And you can see that, one, we're providing ample, perhaps a bit thin, but ample debt service coverage numbers, and we are in fact generating a substantial amount of cash internally. And I would point you to the available for debt service line, or the total debt service line immediately under the available for debt service line. That total debt service is debt service on 100% of Santee Cooper's outstanding debt, both nuclear and non-nuclear. So we're paying all our bills. We're paying all our bills with a good margin that leaves cash on the bottom line. A great benefit to our customers is the emphasis in recent years over availing ourselves of lower cost power purchases on the open market, and you can see the basic trend in fuel costs heading down. Charlie will talk a little bit about the percent that's generated versus the percent that's purchased. but that chart has driven down customer prices, as you can see on the bottom here, pretty substantially. Fuel prices for retail down 16% since 2014, down 14% for industrial, down 11% for central, and the bill impact of that, the total bill impact of that is a decrease of 4.6% for retail, 6.9 on industrial, and 5.3 on central. Terrific results and a great focus on economizing to the benefit of our customer. Okay. There you go. Same story here, basically. The top chart is prices to central, the bottom chart is prices to residential in cents per kilowatt hour. These are total prices. They include both fuel and base prices, and you can see since 2014, for the most part, these are quite steady over the course of time, which during that period of time, and with everything, frankly, that Santee Cooper has been through, that's a remarkable record, and we anticipate in this business plan extending the time frame during which prices to our customers will, in fact, be stable. They're also competitive, as you can see here. Dominion on the bottom, 125, Santee Cooper on the top, 117. We are the lowest of the majors in serving a typical residential customer, so you're at a competitive level to begin with, and we're seeking greater stability going forward as well. Through the operation of this plan, we think both those things are in fact possible, and pleased to put it in front of you. The debt equity ratio itself, I would point out only that the current debt equity ratio is 77%, the lowest debt equity ratio that Santee Cooper has had in roughly the last 40 years. It would appear to me 35 or 40 years is in fact 69%. You can see it right in the middle of the chart in the year 2005. We're pleased to report that this new revised business forecast takes us back to that lowest level in the last 40 years within 7 years. So it's moving our balance sheet very favorably to a lower level of debt reliance. This is the mission of Santee Cooper, to be the state's leading resource for improving the quality of life for all South Carolinians, and our challenge thus has been respecting this mission while charting a new path forward. By way of background, we do regularly review our loads and resources. As you can see here, this business forecast does contain substantial changes to the resource mix and the financing plan, which we will talk about over the course of the presentation. We are requesting board approval of the overall strategy set out in the business forecast. This business forecast will also serve as the basis for Santee Cooper's formal budget proposal as well, so there is a normal course element to this, very importantly. And as you see on the bottom, the DOA will provide this base case to all prospective bidders as well. So I'd focus your attention really on the second bullet, transforming the generation fleet, which Charlie's going to talk about here in just a second, to reduce costs, to preserve reliability, to improve environmental statistics, less coal, more solar, improve resource diversity. He will show you a chart that shows a dramatic change in the resource mix over the course of time of Santee Cooper towards a more diverse portfolio. Diversity is a good thing. Ensures the ability to adapt to a wide range of future conditions. I won't wax philosophic on that, but I want Charlie to focus on it. We took great care in developing this resource plan to make sure that this is a plan that could adapt to changing conditions of all types going forward. This is not an all eggs in one basket type of forecast. It in fact can move with the times dimensionally as well as directionally, and it takes a great deal of effort to create a plan that has that kind of flexibility or that kind of optionality in it, and I credit Mr. Duckworth and his team in doing that. As you can see on the bottom of the executive summary, we have been able to effect savings which mitigate the need for future price increases. So there was a 7% number that was bandied about a year or so ago at the inception of the ICF process, and we have been successful in eliminating the need for that 7%. So that number is gone, and in its place is a projection of stable rates going forward for the next 5 years on top of the historical stability that has been shown by Santee Cooper. And with that, I'll turn it over to Charlie for a discussion on the generation and transmission resource plan.
Good afternoon. I just want to quickly second a comment that Mark made about last week. I do have a brand new understanding of what storm means. I know that it didn't affect us the way prior ones have. But the most memorable thing for me wasn't Dorian. It was seeing Santee Cooper's employees pull together and respond to the issues caused by the storm. You have a great group of employees, and I'm proud to be one of them. My purpose today is, as Mark said, to share with you the new proposed loads and resources roadmap, and I'm calling it a roadmap on purpose. Its goal is to lay out a plan that ensures reliable supply, keeps customer costs low, practices good environmental stewardship, and is flexible and adaptable. And I am going to spend a little time talking about that, because that is one of, if not the most important piece of developing a good resource plan. To be clear, we're not here making decisions about specific resources today. This is a path. It's a roadmap. When we get to the point where decisions are specifically needed, we would make those decisions. You would make those decisions, given the best information available at that point in time. So that's. This is a picture of the ICF business as usual case. It was our starting point. It's basically a no change case. So on the pie charts, you see the projected energy mix that was in that particular forecast. And then you see the capacity mix over in the table on the right. So basically, coal is the dominant source, and you see the other pieces. This case also has, or would have anticipated more generation capacity than needed through until the 2030s, the early 2030s. Hopefully, as Mark said, I won't wax too philosophic on this, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about how do you develop a loads and resources plan. What's the process that you go about doing that and doing it well? It's an iterative process. It's a time-consuming process, and it really is a matter of balancing some different factors that you see up here. The first of those factors, or one of those factors, is resource changes. You need to look at your existing resources and ask yourself, would it make sense perhaps to retire some of those resources? Which ones make the most sense to keep? On the resource end of things, you also look at new resources. What might I want to add? What would happen if I added this or that different type of resource? So step one in that is looking at resources. When you're in the process of doing that, you need to ask yourself, if I make changes to my resource system, then what transmission issues might that cause? What would I need to do to the transmission system to make sure that you have a reliable supply with those particular changes? The other thing that you need to really take a look at is relative to natural gas transportation. If you're going to add additional natural gas resources, you need to make sure that you can get the commodity, the fuel, to those generating stations. So it's a matter of asking yourself, what resources might you want to retire? What might you want to add, and where? And what types of resources might you want to add? Looking at the transmission side of things, and then the natural gas pipeline capability. As you going through that process now, the next couple slides talk about, as a result of that work, where did the plan end up. Before I jump into that, and I'm going to add to something that Mark said, this work involves hundreds of simulation cases. Looking at, if I tried retiring this and replacing with that, if I looked at these transmission additions, it requires running through hundreds of cases, and Vicki and her team and John Painter and the in-front folks have done a terrific job looking at that, and it's really becomes a learning process. As you sort your way through running those cases, you begin to see which types of combinations make the most sense and which ones don't, and that helps you be able to learn about the flexibility that needs to be incorporated in a plan. So what are the changes that were the result of this process? First is a deliberate and meaningful reduction in coal. And the plan envisions, as a part of that 2 units at Winya would be retired in 23, as you see there, the remaining 2 units in 2027. And then as we, on an ongoing basis, we would continue to look at the other coal across and see how assumptions might change, what new technologies might be available, and that there's the potential that replacing some of those units out later in time might make sense. So one fundamental direction is a deliberate, meaningful reduction in coal. Second is that to add sustainable resources. The predominance of those resources will be solar. You see 1,000 megawatts there by 2024. There will also be, the plan envisions adding battery storage to 200 megawatts over a range of years. As you see there, batteries have been continuing to improve their performance and come down in prices. They help, solar does not help you meet your peak needs in the winter when the peak occurs. The sun's not up, so solar will not help you. Having some battery storage could help use that solar in a peaking way. It also provides support to the transmission system. So if you properly place and rewood those units, you would be able to avoid or delay the need for additional transmission. The plan also envisions demand side options, and this would be something that we would need to do working with Central. These are programs like time of use pricing, where you would change the nature or the shape of the load that you have to meet, and therefore change the generation needed to meet that load. You see that the assumption in the plan is 150 megawatts phased in 2020 through 27, and then 50 megawatts phased in 28 through 37. The changes continue when you make the retirement at Winya. You need to do some things in the short term to ensure that you can have a reliable supply to customers in that area. Those changes would be adding 100 megawatts of a simple cycle turbine to the Ori-Georgetown area, and then making a small capacity purchase. And then the plan envisions natural gas, adding more natural gas resources, 500 megawatts in 2027 when the second half of Winya is retired, and then another 500 to 600 megawatts in the early 30s. We would be looking at the best sites for those, and the best ways to get those new resources onto our system, and where possible, might be able to work with others to make that a more attractive way to do it. And then the plan envisions increasing, Mark talked about the purchases that you've been making that have saved a lot of money for customers. The plan envisions, and we're working on a hedging plan that would make more certain out into the future the savings associated with those purchases. So if you take a look at the new Loads and Resources Plan, this chart compares the energy supply of the old plan, 2033, so this is out a little bit in time. The prior plan, the ICF business as usual case, it compares that with the new plan in terms of the sources of energy. You can see the chart. Coal drops from 52% to 30%, and then you see that sustainable resources are about triple what they were in the business as usual case. It's a much more diverse mix, as Mark indicated. If you look at it on a capacity basis, installed capacity basis, it's a similar chart. Won't take you through all the numbers, but again, coal is dramatically lower. Sustainable resources are dramatically higher. It's a greener, it's a more diverse mix, and therefore better able to respond to changes that will happen to the assumptions that were a part of that plan. As a result of these changes, you can not only make your plan more diverse, greener, you can do that and save money in the process, and that's very significant. When you run these changes and the assumptions associated with them through the models, the estimated savings are 90 to 120 million per year in the early years, starting in 23 when you make those retirements, and then out over time it gets to 150 million averaged and greater, and that's compared back to the ICF business as usual case. These savings are incorporated into the financial results that you will see, and we'll work to improve those savings through alliances where that's possible to do. I want to spend just a little time on this because, as I said earlier, it's really one of the most important pieces of developing a good new Loads and Resources Plan. And I'm going to use an example to talk about this. This is really asking yourself, what could this plan be responsive? Is it flexible enough to deal with uncertainties, changes that will happen in the future? 10 to 15 years ago, those of us buying natural gas on the market were paying $12 to $14, $15 per MMBTU for natural gas. Those prices were projected to increase from that point in time. Today, we're sitting here, and you can buy natural gas for $2 to $3 per MMBTU, and those projections, the projection for costs going forward are that they will stay about flat. I promise you that the best resource decisions are fundamentally different in a $2 to $3 gas environment compared to $12 to $15. The point of this isn't, however, that you really need to get your assumptions right, because we will not. We don't know what the future is going to hold. The point and the purpose of a good resource plan is to make sure that you know it can flex, that it can deal with changes as they occur, because we're going to be wrong in the assumptions. So a lot of work has gone into looking at that 300 to 400 cases that were run to understand the tendencies, the directions that seem to make sense, so that you can anticipate when you start to head down a path where things are changing on you, and you have some understanding of, through a wide range of different options that you've looked at, you have some understanding of what changes might make the most sense given what's happening and what's coming. That's really the key to having a good resource plan. This chart, and I won't take you through every aspect of it, but it looks, there's been a lot of work, and this is intended just to summarize the different kinds of changes in future conditions on the left column, and the work that was done to look at, what would we do? What would we do if the ACP doesn't overcome the legal challenges and therefore doesn't get built, does that torpedo the plan in terms of the ability to continue to proceed? So a lot of work's gone into that. That work is continuing and ongoing, but it's really had a lot of good thought put into it, and that is, in my view, the most important part of a good resource plan going forward. An important objective of this plan was to be greener. You've heard Mark and others talk about that. This is a pretty simple chart, but it shows that in terms of carbon emissions, which is where most people focus at this point, between 2005, which is a benchmark year that a lot of people use, and 2015, Santee Cooper had already reduced its carbon emissions down to 82% of where they were in 2005. And the average of 2030 through 2039 in terms of carbon emissions are 43% below that level. So there's a dramatic change in the emissions profile and the environmental stewardship in this plan. So to summarize, the plan includes a deliberate, meaningful reduction in coal, and that reduces carbon emissions. It increases the sustainable resources and new technology in the plan. It preserves reliability and power system integrity, and that's just critical. It's something that we can't compromise, and we did talk a lot with E3 about that piece of it, and including the fact that you need to really look at regional power flow studies to make sure that reliability will exist. It reduces cost to customers. It's flexible and adaptable, and it's more aligned with the portfolios of other utilities in the area. That's the conclusion of my portion. Unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Charlie. A significant bullet on that chart, this last chart is right here, regional power flow analysis, because as we looked at all of these scenarios, we did in fact do the power flow analysis to make sure that reliability was in fact preserved. Those are highly technical studies. They're very complex. They require some specific expertise, but we wanted to make sure that we in fact conducted them and would hope that everybody else is looking at the system would conduct them similarly in order to assure the public that reliability will in fact be maintained. Another part of the plan is organizational and cost reform efforts. We have initiated some additional studies on the level of staffing within Santee Cooper. As you can see in the second bullet, in 2018, an evaluation was conducted and concluded that the operations are quite strong. The staffing levels are generally appropriate, but we've reinitiated that. It's never wasted effort to reevaluate those kinds of conclusions. So another evaluation is currently underway, as you can see in the third bullet, covering two areas for the most part. One is procurement policies. The procurement area at any utility, Santee Cooper as well, conducts a lot of spend on behalf of the institution, and it's always a good idea to look at that and make sure that we're following best practices and getting the best and reasonable prices for the things that we buy and use every single day. And the second piece of that is to look at coal-fired maintenance procedures in particular. Why coal-fired maintenance? It's because that's where the biggest block of employees for an operation such as Santee Cooper or my former employee, Salt River Project, are located. So we're doing those evaluations there underway, and we'll incorporate the results as soon as we have them. As you can see in the last bullet, we are as well conducting a span of control evaluation. Mr. Locke is doing that in order to consider how best we might flatten the organization. We did assume that we would stay at this level that you see. Look at headcount had been reduced since the beginning of 2017 by some 10% at Santee Cooper. That's a tremendous accomplishment, and we're committed to basically staying at that at that level and considering the kinds of studies that I mentioned earlier insofar as any changes to that, but do so in a thoughtful, analytical way, but stay within that 10% bubble that you can see there. That locks in approximately $18 million in additional savings. There might be the possibility of additional reductions from future changes in resource plans, specifically WINYA. I did go and talk to the folks at WINYA, and we identified specifically that WINYA was in fact the plan that we were anticipating ceasing operations on in a phased way, but advised them to the best of our ability within the time frame that we've identified there. We're going to try to absorb, if you will, or manage the human resource implication of ceasing operations at that plant through retirements and attritions, not only at WINYA but as well at Cross, retraining and repurposing of folks within the body corporate. So that's our goal, and to try to get to that point in the future without layoffs if we possibly can. Strategic alliances. Santee Cooper seeking opportunities for strategic alliances. You can see the purposes down below that are listed down below: coordinated planning, potential acquisition of future infrastructure, management of volume buying opportunities, scale, in other words, optimization of generation dispatch, a joint savings opportunity between utilities, and you can see the list as well. So we will seek these strategic alliances to pursue savings in these various areas. I do want to emphasize that there are two words in the top paragraph that say where possible. So we'll seek opportunities for strategic alliances where possible. And that's the subject of the prior MOU issue, as a matter of fact, and it is my obligation and your charge to me to coordinate with Marcia Adams, the director of the DOA, to make sure that whatever we do in that regard is in fact done consistent with their preferences and instruction, and it doesn't violate or injure the 4287 process in any way, shape, or form. But we do need the ability to examine some of these items because it's a way to make the institution financially better going forward, and we would like to have that opportunity and enhance this plan even further. Employee ideas. There was an effort unveiled when, Pamela?
We started in June.
Started in June to harvest employee ideas about their suggestions as to how we can make things better and save a little money. And as you can see here, over 1,000 ideas were in fact submitted by folks. A lot of those ideas have in fact been incorporated into the purposes of the strategic alliances. They have been cataloged, they've been prioritized, and we are in fact pursuing a number of those. And I want to thank all of the employees that gave good thought to coming up with those 1,000 ideas. There was one idea of the 1,000 that was really pretty lousy, and we put it on the bottom of the list. It was submitted by Mike Baxley. That's a joke. I'm kidding you. I'm yanking your chain, Mike. AMI technology as well. We look forward to a faster rollout of AMI technology, automated meter interface technology. The company has, in fact, begun the rollout of smart meters in its retail service territory. As you can see in the second bullet, 30,000 meters currently deployed. We would like to, in fact, speed up the deployment of smart meter technology because I'm telling you, given our experience, Charlie's and my experience at SRP, this is a key to the future. It's very technologically advanced. It provides your customers with better service and more options, and the company with savings as well. And we're very interested in pursuing getting to a modern customer service platform as soon as we possibly can for all of our retail customers. I'm going to ask Pamela to address the next section. Pamela.
Thank you, Mark. So as we look at our business plan and we think about our mission, which Mark referred to earlier, and the types of programs and services that we've been providing over the years, we want to be able to continue to fulfill the mission, but we need to be respectful of the financial obligations that we may incur. So So we've looked hard at what we do. Some of these things are core to our mission, things like environmental stewardship, things like economic development. We want to continue to do those. There are some other things over the past couple of years that frankly we've backed off on a little bit. So we examined carefully what can we continue to do, what should we continue to do to fulfill our mission, and also our obligation to our customers. So what I'm about to show you are the things that we do believe are core to our mission that we're going to continue to do and that our business plan and the financial plan contemplates Santee Cooper continuing to do. So of course, economic development, which we feel strongly about, which we've had success with over the years, which we have worked closely with our electric cooperative partners. So currently we have devoted over $8 million in grants, again, working with the co-ops to distribute those grants across the state. We have a low interest loan program. We have Commerce Park development. Most recently, you've seen the opening of the new interchange at the Camp Hall Commerce Park where Volvo's located. But over the years, we've also worked with economic development partners to develop the Mount Holly Commerce Park, the Loris Commerce Park, Atlantic Center, and are working with Horry County on Ascot Valley right now. We also manage Lakes Marion and Moultrie, which are very important to the state. We've heard that repeatedly over the last couple of years, and we take that obligation seriously as well. So we monitor water quality. We contribute to the health of the fisheries. We control aquatic plant management. We provide recreational opportunities. All of these things we will continue to do. Most significantly, the extensive dams and dike system that we have, over 40 miles of dams and dikes that we have crews devoted 100% to maintaining, to keep the lake safe, to keep our communities safe. And our environmental stewardship as well. In addition to working with our customers on energy efficiency programs, we also have engaged in beneficial reuse programs for our coal combustion residual products, that's coal ash and gypsum. And recycling, we have the Gopher program, Give Oil for Environmental Recovery, that takes used oil, picks up used oil from DIY stations around the state, from some industrial folks, and we recycle it. We'll continue those programs as well as our successful partnership with DNR in managing wildlife areas around the lakes. We have educational programs for students and teachers that we conduct at Old Santee Canal Park. We bring energy educators in here, again, to teach them about Santee Cooper, about the environment, and we have solar schools where we have solar panels installed, again, working with cooperatives across the state, and develop a curriculum for teachers to use to teach students about the value of solar power. And last but not least, our operation of the regional water systems down in this part of the state. We have over 185,000 end users. We treat water at wholesale and sell it to counties and towns that then distribute it to end users, but those are a very important part of the economy and the environment of this region. Like any business, we also have obligations, and our financial forecast envisions that we continue to meet these obligations. You know, our employee and our retiree pension and other benefit plans right now, our portion of the state's liability on the pension plan is $325 million, so we carry that liability, show it on our books, and we continue to provide post-employment retiree benefits to our employees. We have contracts that you've heard about before for beneficial reuse of our coal combustion products. Of course, we have fuel contracts, be it coal, be it natural gas, as well as transportation contracts that go out sometime into the future that we will continue. The FERC license renewal that we have been actively engaged in, trying to renew our FERC license. We know that the license renewal will involve some additional capital spending to work on fish passage and other issues. So those responsibilities are built into the plan. Obviously, we have nuclear decommissioning costs. We have set aside some funding so that when VC Summer 1 is decommissioned, we will have the financial wherewithal to do what needs to be done to decommission that plant. Any questions about any? And I also want to talk, of course, about our relationship with Central. You know, we have a long-term agreement with Central, our largest customer. And we have not had the opportunity to discuss with Central the components in this business plan. And Central has asked us, out of respect for the DOA process, that we not sit down and talk to them. We look forward to our ability to do that when and in the manner that the DOA tells us is proper under the plan. And we believe, because we believe this plan provides the best plan for all of our customers, including our cooperative customers, we believe that Central will join us in this plan moving forward. So we have assumed that Central will be there, will be our customer as they are today. You all know that the contract with Central does have certain opt-out provisions that would allow them to opt out of certain resources in the future. So we have not had the ability to discuss those issues with Central. At this point in time, as Charlie told you, we're bringing you a roadmap. You know, we're not asking you to make a decision today on any resource, be it retiring an old one or putting in place a new one. So we're not at a point where we would need to go to Central and work things out. But we have to assume something going forward. And so we've assumed that the load forecast that they gave us earlier this year is the load that we will serve moving forward. All right, at this point, I'll turn it over to Raul.
Good afternoon. We have produced a 20-year financial forecast, thank you, which combines all elements of our business plan, including the load and resource plan that Charlie presented and all the obligations that Pamela discussed. It really seeks to achieve following goals: an accelerated reduction in nuclear debt, further reduction in debt service cost by pursuing refinancing opportunities. We will explore the benefits of securitization to our customers, but given that this requires legislative approval and extensive collaboration with Central, we have currently not included the savings from a securitization structure in our financial plan as of today. Third, customer rates. Our goal is to stabilize rates for all customers for the next 5 years, which will be a continuation of historical trend that Mark shared with you. For our direct served retail customers, we are targeting a rate freeze for the next 5 years through 2024. We did not raise rates in 2018 and 2019, so this would be a 7-year rate freeze, a base rate freeze for our direct served customers. Our last rate increase was in 2017, average about 2%. Finally, even beyond the 5-year rate freeze, we are targeting no rate increases that will increase inflation. So the real impact on our customers would be stable rates or declining rates, net of inflation. Finally, we are committed to ensuring the financial health of Santee Cooper, and we will target financial metrics that would help us achieve or maintain our single-A credit rating. The cost reduction from the resource plan and other initiatives, combined with the new favorable load forecast, helps us divert more funds and accelerate the nuclear debt reduction. In addition to the $430 million of the Toshiba settlement proceeds that we already deployed to reduce debt, we are committing another $900+ million over the next 2 years for nuclear debt reduction. We will kick off this program this year, in the fourth quarter of this year, by using $350 million of our internal funds to pay off nuclear debt. In next year, in 2020, we project an additional $150 million available for debt reduction. These funds will come from, again, internal funds generated from operations and from reduction in coal inventory. And finally, we are committed to diverting all funds from the proceeds of the nuclear equipment at the Summit 2 and 3 site for nuclear debt reduction, which we have currently assumed to be $425 million. This approach of paying down debt will ensure that we have sufficient liquidity to run our operations or meet any unknown needs. We'll have at least 3 to 4 months of cash on hand. The one amount that's not mentioned here, and it's in our financial forecast, this is the 2-year plan Over the duration of the 20-year forecast, we project about $300 million more will become available for debt reduction, which we will continue to deploy for nuclear debt paydown. This demonstrates or illustrates the impact of debt paydown. This debt chart goes for the duration of our debt service through about 2058. And it includes revenue obligations, debt service only. It excludes a small piece of debt service for our commercial paper program. The red line demonstrates the debt service that will be collected from customers. That's a debt service in rates. The gray bars above the red line show the savings from debt paydown. A couple takeaways on the red line. Our debt service and revenue requirements currently is about 440 to 450 million. At the peak, in about 2027, this would be in the 490 to 500 million range. The gray bars above the red line, which is the avoided debt service from debt paydown, amounts to about 2.8 billion during the duration of this debt service. A couple other important takeaways on this chart is that the debt paydown that we're targeting is not focused on the first 20 years. It's across the maturity schedule. We are trying to reduce debt throughout. And the second important thing is that even beyond the 20-year horizon of our forecast, our debt service actually dips. So we have enough flexibility and capacity in our balance sheet to absorb any future capital needs that we may not be aware of today. Other debt opportunities, these primarily focus on our callable tax-exempt debt. As you know, all of our, or majority of our tax-exempt debt is financed with a 10-year call. It's 30 to 40-year amortizing debt, which is generally issued with premium coupons, 5% on average, but it can be called at par after 10 years, and we can reduce interest cost based on prevailing rates at the time. Our mini bonds are currently callable. So concurrently with the debt paydown, next quarter, about $350 million of proceeds will be used for nuclear debt paydown, but we will also refund about $175 million of remaining mini bonds with a new refinancing offering, a limited public offering in the amount of about $175 million. That will just provide us the benefit of current low interest rates, and we currently estimate those savings to be approximately $11 million on a present value basis, and about in the 18 million range on a gross basis. We also have, after this debt paydown and refinancing the mini bonds, in our portfolio we have $4.2 billion of callable tax-exempt debt, which is captured in the chart at the bottom. And you can see that majority of these become callable in the years 23 to 2026, so in 3 years from now. If history is any indication, and based on assumed interest rates, these bonds will provide significant savings. We estimated this savings based on 3-year historical average rates, and that number was about $2 billion in gross savings. Clearly, these savings are interest rate market dependent, but the rates we used for this analysis were about 90 to 100 basis points higher than current prevailing interest rates. Finally, another point of note, I mentioned the securitization opportunity. This is, again, a significant lift from a legislative approval process and a collaboration with Central. So this 3-year window after which our bonds become callable is a critical window to plan that transaction and get it ready for execution, because we need those candidates, the big ones, in the future to execute any large potential securitization transaction. The next 2 slides, I'll just briefly mention the upcoming transaction we're planning in the 4th quarter of this year. Following the board's discussion of the business plan today, notices will be sent out to impacted bondholders, the ones who will be impacted by the $350 million debt reduction. In about 6 weeks, the week of October 14, we are planning to price an LPO transaction which will refinance the $175 million of mini bonds, which is the non-nuclear portion of the mini bonds. The nuclear portion of the mini bonds will be paid off, and with this refinancing, the mini bond program will be closed. Finally, the transaction will close a week later, the week of October 21, and the funds to redeem mini bonds will be put in an escrow, and those mini bonds will be redeemed on January 1 of 2020. The transaction overview, the top right half talks about the debt paydown. We'll use $350 million of proceeds. The sources of those funds are all the remaining Toshiba settlement funds, approximately $144 million. All the balance in the debt reduction fund, about $112 million, and the remaining $94 million come from internal funds, CIF and revenue fund. The uses of funds, paying off about $60 million. $60 million will be for the paydown of mini bonds, and the remaining $290 million of cash will be used to take out other revenue bonds. The bottom right half of the page, or the middle half, talks about the limited purchase offering. Again, this would be a bond issue which we'll have to price. It's interest rate sensitive. About $175 million size is what we're expecting to take out the remaining mini bonds and close that program. The $350 million cash defeasance will impact our cash on hand, and that number is in the bottom right, 131 days. So a little over 4 months of cash on hand. We'll still be left with that much cash after paying down this debt. Impact on revenue requirements. Again, revenue requirements drive our customers' rates. What we've shared here is the annual growth rate in revenue requirements on a cents per kilowatt hour basis. We've showed the two rows on this table. The first one is fuel and purchase power. That's about 40% of our revenue requirement. Again, for context, in projected 2020, our aggregate revenue requirement is about $1.75 billion. The fuel portion is about $700 million. And then the remaining revenue requirement consists of non-fuel O&M, debt service, CIF, and other amounts. And this is really, most of this is fixed cost. The fuel and purchase power is passed through to customers. The two columns, the first column, years 2020 through 2024, is the 5-year rate freeze period that we are targeting. And you can see that the fuel prices are projected to decline about 0.6% annually over this period. And this benefit will be passed on to all customers. And then you can see the fixed cost, the second row, is also declining. This will enable us to deliver that 5-year rate freeze that we discussed. And then the subsequent 15 years, again, annual increase on a nominal basis of about 1.3%. And thing of note is that it's primarily driven by the fuel and purchase power cost, 2.2% number, which relies on long-term fuel cost assumptions. Two takeaways. We've noted the annual inflation number, 2.1%, which is based on 20-year historical CPI. And that's about the inflation amount that the Fed targets. So if that inflation comes true in real terms, our customers' prices will decline by 1.1% annually over the next 20 years. And another takeaway is the new financial forecast has revenue requirements which are 10% below the ICF business as usual case from last year. Impact on customers. This shows the impact on Central over a 12-year period going back 6 years and forward 6 years based on our new financial forecast. You can see the rates are stable, 7.22 cents per kilowatt hour in 2014 and the same amount in 25. Jumps a little bit between those amounts. The highest peak here is 2019, 731. But I would note this is based on our budget from 2019, and our fuel cost, actual fuel cost is much lower than we had projected, and we expect that amount to be closer to the 2018 and 2020 amounts. This is my final page. We continue to maintain healthy financial metrics. Our debt service coverage, our projections show to be about in the mid 1.3 range. Debt to capitalization will continue to decline as in spite of the capital program that will come into play because of the new load and resource plan, we'll pay down more debt than we'll issue, and our debt will continue to decline every year, and leverage ratios will improve. And finally, the bottom chart captures the real prices to customers adjusted for inflation, and this is the 1.1% annual decline I mentioned on the prior page. So we expect to maintain financial health, and we will be competitive. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. Mike?
Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a discussion of the process and the timeline going forward. As you know, obviously today, September the 9th, we have submitted our business forecast as part of the process, and then laid out here for you are some timelines and time periods, and it discusses what we will be doing and then what is permissible in terms of communications under the DOA process. You also have this document in your board books, but just suffice it to say, going forward, as we begin the process, and we anticipate signing an NDA with the DOA, that is Santee Cooper, with the Department of Administration this week. And all of the bidders who sign NDAs, not just Santee Cooper's, we put forth our own bid, but all of the others, are not to disclose the process and the work as they move forward to their bid and as we move forward to our reform plan. Right now, November 15th is the date which is anticipated that the bids will actually be submitted. That date may move just a little bit, but assuming that all the bids will go in on the same day, once that process occurs, then it becomes a time period for the DOA to make its recommendation to the General Assembly. And during that time, there's not to be any communications to the DOA, to the governor. The communications will not be coming from the DOA to those entities either. It's just simply a time when the participants in the process are not to engage in communications. And then, of course, when the matter goes to the General Assembly, there's a specific prohibition in the law about what I would call lobbying or discussing your proposal or others' proposals with the members of the General Assembly. We just laid this out to sort of capsulize the process to determine or to show what will be being done during the time period and what communications are permitted under H 4287. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have about H 4287 or the process. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Conclusion, you can see the bullets, leaner, greener resource mix clearly. The resource mix and the financial transactions that are contemplated in this plan drive an ability to secure prices at a level that's frozen for the next 5 years. Inflation thus means there will be falling real prices for our customers, and falling real prices for an institution such as Santee Cooper is in fact its mission. It's supposed to be a favorable impact on local economy. That's an expression of being the local economy. That's an expression of being able to help the local economy by having your prices, in fact, fall in real terms. That reduces the real cost of the factors of production. Substantial debt reduction, as you see contemplated here, enhancement to customer service, and the advancement of the rollout of automated metering technology, and maintenance of our economic development, water management, et cetera, position. So this is a good plan. It's a substantially enhanced plan from what Santee Cooper had produced before. We do look forward to the opportunity to enhance it further as we contemplate the submission in the reform plan. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody's got. We do solicit your support and approval.
Any questions?
A lot of good work, I think, coming up with this plan. asked, and that is it provides substantial additional, it prevents substantial additional cost increases going forward. And thanks to the team that worked, all the teams worked hard on this.
Any questions or comments from those on the phone as well? Hearing none, at this time, I will call for a motion to approve the business plan. Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I guess now that the business plan has been adopted, I'd just like to say that this is an exciting day for Santee Cooper moving forward. A lot of hard work went into this plan. This is a real plan that will be incorporated for Santee Cooper, and I'm excited about the opportunities for our customers and our employees. This is a new day and a new opportunity for Santee Cooper to move forward on this path. And I'm just very excited for the team, and I'd like to pass our appreciation on to the employees of Santee Cooper, who I know have worked hard over the last 60 days to put this plan together in very short order. But a lot of thought and a lot of hard work went into this, and I appreciate every person's effort on this, because I know it's been a lot of long days and even weekends working on this. So Mark, yeah, absolutely. If with no other comments or on this particular item, at this point, we're going to reconvene the executive session and conclude the executive session agenda. So with that, I'll ask the audience to please step out so we can conclude that. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And just to note, we are out of executive session and no action was taken in executive session. And with no other matters before the board, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your time and your patience, everyone.